All speakers, virtual or hybrid, will receive 2 minutes to comment as an individual. Only representatives of a county board appointed advisory group, committee, and/or commission will receive 3 minutes to comment. A timer will be displayed on the screen if speaking virtually, and speakers in person will follow the timer stationed on the podium. Audio of tonight's meeting is available via phone. If commissioners, presenters, or speakers lose internet connectivity, please reconnect by phone. However, if you are dialing in by phone and unable to see the screen, we will provide an audible 30-second warning to wrap up your comments. You'll be muted when your time has expired. The meeting chat is active for presenters and commissioners who need technical assistance only. Please do not use the meeting chat for discussion, public comment, questions about agenda items, or requests for further information. All public comments must be shared verbally for the record during the assigned public testimony period. Tonight's meeting will be available for review through YouTube and Microsoft Teams platforms. A link has been provided on the Planning Commission website 24 to 48 hours after the adjournment of the meeting. The meeting will be available for review with closed captioning on Comcast Xfinity channels 25 and 1085, Verizon Fios channels 39 and 40, 24 to 48 hours after the adjournment of the meeting. Lastly, this is a public forum. Tonight's meeting will be recorded and posted to the county website via a link to YouTube as stated. All information associated with tonight's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to the Virginia Freedom of Information Act requirements. Madam Clerk, can you please call the first item?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Peterson. Our first item for the evening is SPLN 23-00006. This is known as Site Plan 476. The property at 1129 North Utah Street. We have Cedric Sutherland, our project manager, to speak on this item this evening.
Good evening, commissioners. Thank you for having me. Again, my name is Cedric Sutherland with the Arlington County Planning Division. With me, I have Mr. Matthew Pfeiffer, Site Plan Review Coordinator, as well as Ms. Joanne Gabor, Development Review Manager with Department of Environmental Services, Development Services Bureau. Again, this is a new site plan request for semi-detached dwellings located at 1129 North Utah Street. The subject property is located mid-block of North Utah Street between Washington Boulevard to the north and 11th Street North to the south. The site is currently comprised of a single detached dwelling built in 1948 on a 6,000 square foot lot with on-site parking in the rear accessed by a public alley.
Mr. Sutherland, may I interrupt? Can you move the mic closer?
Sorry.
Thank you so much.
This site is zoned R1530T, a townhome dwelling district. The applicant is not proposing any changes to the zoning designation. The applicant proposes to develop a 4-story semi-detached residential dwelling with rear garages. In order to accomplish the proposed development, the applicant has requested several modifications of setback requirements of the zoning ordinance, including front yard, side yard setbacks, and permitted encroachments. This slide just demonstrates the existing layout of the existing home as opposed to the proposed semi-detached dwellings as cited on the property. Next, we'll go to the staff analysis. First, in planning policy guidance, the Boston sector plan calls for neighborhood preservation and residential infill. It further goes on to state that residential infill projects should include architectural detailing and layout designs compatible with existing housing styles. Staff believes that the applicant has demonstrated compliance with the sector plan based on the housing type and facade materials that are on the houses that surround the neighborhood. Next, the general land use plan, or better known as the GLUP. The GLUP designation is low medium residential, and the R1530T zoning district is consistent with the GLUP designation. Next, through the special exception process, the Arlington County zoning ordinance sets a minimum criteria for semi-detached dwellings in this zoning district, and allows for the county board to modify several standards of the zoning ordinance. The applicant's proposal meets all requirements except for the setback standards, which they are seeking relief. Additionally, the subject property, due to the subject property's lot size, the only type of development that is allowed on this site is a single-family detached home. Also, the R1530T zoning district was not included in the updates to the zoning amendment that enabled expanded housing options this past summer. In terms of setbacks, the applicant is asking for a front yard setback to the main dwelling of 20 feet instead of the required 25 feet, a reduction of side yards from 17 feet to 4.6 feet. The applicant is also asking to reduce the rear garage setback along the common lot line to 0 in order to build attached garages. Lastly, the applicant is seeking relief of setbacks for permitted encroachments in order to build stormwater planter in the front, eaves along the house, and placement of AC units within the side yards. Here is this photo demonstrates the setback comparison along North Utah Street. Staff supports the modification of the setbacks as they are consistent with the surrounding context of the neighborhood. In terms of transportation, the site plan is guided by the Master Transportation Plan and the Roslyn-Boston Corridor Streetscape Standards. According to the Master Transportation Plan, North Utah Street is designated as a non-arterial neighborhood street, recommending 4 to 6 foot wide sidewalk and 2 to 4 foot wide landing strip in the Roslyn-Boston Corridor Streetscape Standards. North Arlington Street is categorized as type C streetscape, recommending a streetscape minimum width of 10 feet, including a 6 foot clear sidewalk and a 4 foot wide planting strip. The pedestrian access to the site is available via North Utah Street or the public alley at the rear. The vehicle entry is facilitated through the public alley, where each unit will have a detached garage. The current streetscape features a 4 foot wide sidewalk and 2 foot wide planting strip, which the applicant intends to maintain in accordance with the Master Transportation Plan standards. North Arlington Utah Street's site frontage has a 25 foot curb to curb section comprising of a one-way southbound travel lane and an on-street parking lane. The increased width at the site's frontage when compared to the street section north and south of the site is due to accommodating fire access and turning movements to the town home development across the street. Next, we'll go over the evolution of the project. The initial design of the front elevation of the dwellings had an asymmetrical facade to differentiate the 2 units. Upon staff and neighbors' comments, the applicant has revised the front elevation to provide symmetry and balance with the use of materials. Staff also received comments regarding the side elevations. As you see to the left, the original drawing is also is asymmetrical on this elevation, especially concerning the window placement. The applicant has revised the drawing to wrap the board and batten feature from the front elevation around to the side and has arranged the window placement in a symmetrical manner. Next, we will discuss site improvements and community benefits. Through this development, there will be site improvements to the streetscape with new sidewalk and gutter replacement along the frontage of the site. Stormwater runoff will be controlled through the installation of stormwater planters and required county ordinances to address erosion and settlement control. Lastly, this project will deliver an additional housing unit other than what is required by right. or allowed by right, should I say. In terms of community benefits, the applicant is proposing to build at the certified level with a green home choice program. They also propose a contribution to the underground utility fund, and as well as provide street trees along the frontage of their site on site, as they cannot be accommodated in the 2-foot planting strip on the curb. Staff conducted a targeted public process to surrounding neighbors of the property. Due to the scope of this project being the 2-unit semi-detached dwelling, staff opted to host an online community lunch and learn instead of the formal SPRC process to allow them the opportunity to engage with staff and the developer. And throughout the process, the site plan was accepted in September of last year with online engagement through the middle of November to the beginning of December. Again, the lunch and learn was held at the end of November. Additionally, we had a meeting with the adjacent townhome association to the south of Fairleigh Courts in December. And currently, we're at the Planning Commission. We're scheduled to go to the county board in February. With that, the staff recommends adoption of the site plan for the semi-detached dwellings with modifications and setbacks, subject to the conditions of the staff report. That concludes my presentation.
We have an applicant presentation. You guys ready? Okay.
Good evening. I'm Derek Huting with Beacon Crest Homes. I'm happy to answer any questions the commission may have, but considering the scope of the project and that staff has already provided a good overview, I will otherwise keep my remarks brief. I do want to emphasize the project before the commission is only one of 2 options that were available for this site. When my company first acquired the property, we held a preliminary meeting with county staff in June 2022, where we confirmed that the only 2 allowable uses under the county's zoning ordinance for this property were either 1, a by right option to build 1 single-family detached home, or 2, if we are willing to pursue a special exception and take this property through the 4.1 site plan process, the property could be approved for 2 semi-detached dwellings. Given the property's location and immediate surrounding uses, we felt it deserved to be more than a single dwelling and chose to pursue the 2-unit semi-detached route, and we filed the 4.1 application in March of 2023. As a result of staff dialogue and community engagement, the project evolved from our initial designs, we think for the better, and the proposal you see before you today is, of course, the result of that process. Wrapping up, we continue to believe that the project before the Planning Commission is a better fit for the neighborhood and more closely aligned with the county's housing needs than the by right option. Our proposed units feature 4 bedrooms, 4.5 baths, efficiently designed into 2,600 square feet with private outdoor spaces and 2-car garages that not only meet the parking requirements of the zoning ordinance, but perhaps more importantly, provide needed storage for strollers, bicycles, sports equipment, or whatever else. This housing type is undersupplied in Arlington, and we respectfully request your approval today. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any public speakers?
No speakers.
No speakers. Do we have any commissions? No commissions. Okay. Then the matter is now, sorry, what?
I was the chair.
You were the chair. Okay. So let's hear from Commissioner Peterson for the SPRC report.
I sent you all my report yesterday. This should be a quick agenda item. It was a very small project, more or less an EHO project. It wasn't part of the EHO zoning because this zone already allowed townhouses. So I think we should be fairly quick. We did get a lot of feedback from the community, but ultimately in a community meeting, they kind of said they liked the idea of having 2 units on this lot instead of 1. So And I'm happy to answer any other questions from my report.
Yeah, I just want to lead off. First off, I have no questions for the applicant. Thank you for doing 2 rather than 1. That's great. I'd let this go through. I'm voting for it. Faster the better. My question really is more for staff. Is there some way do we have to actually change the zoning ordinance so that we don't have to go through this for projects this small? The 4.1 process really is not the way to go for small projects. It just unnecessarily adds a lot of expense for both delay and money. What can we do? What should we do in order to make this more efficient and get more units?
Yes, the zoning ordinance will have to be amended to make this put this into a different category, whether it be by right or use permit, which has less criteria for review and development. It's not as robust, but I believe there's also a different another study that's coming about that may address some of these issues. If Matt, you can speak to it.
Sure. Thanks, Cedric. Matt Pfeiffer with the Planning Division. Commissioner Lantelmi, so as Cedric mentioned, yeah, in order to do something more than what the ordinance allows, the ordinance obviously would have to be amended. I would mention that this R1530T zoning district does correspond with the medium residential, so it is a higher density than what we contemplated with the missing middle housing study and EHOs. So it was chosen not to be sort of touched, so to speak, during that study. My understanding is that the RA district as a whole will be looked at as part of the multifamily reinvestment study when and if that comes forward. But I think that's more of a holistic look. So I don't have a good answer for you today, but that's something that we can take back and think about some more.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely recommend that when we have the county board, we have the work sessions for the coming year, which should be coming up. I personally would recommend that the chair and vice chair raise this as it's time now that we have EHO done to look at the RA districts and streamline those also. I mean, we need housing. Again, you guys are great. I'm glad you're doing this. You shouldn't have had to go through this. The expense just is not worth what, you could, if you built the same thing in an R district, you'd be able to build it and it would be by right. And that just doesn't make any sense to me. So it's now time that we move ahead with the RA districts. Thank you.
I do want to make a correction. The R1530T is in the R residential district in the category. It's not in the RA district. So that one point of note that that maybe is additional zoning district that may be looked at when our whole RA section is opened up.
Yeah, this should get pulled. Thank you for the correction. And yes, we should pull this in so that we're looking at all of them, because I'm presuming it isn't just this district that has these oddities in it. Thank you.
Question for Commissioner Peterson. Are there any topics that we would want to go through? Just go by.
No, I
Overall.
think we
Okay.
can quickly.
Thank
I
you.
just wanted to add, we did do an abridged process, SPRC process. Mr. Sutherland, Mr. Pfeiffer, and I adjusted it so that it was appropriate to the scale of the project. But I see your ultimate point
And I
that it must
completely
be
agree with
even
that.
smoother.
It was the right choice. I take my hat off to both of you for streamlining it and not having to go through the SPRC process, the formal SPRC process. Right move, but we need to go beyond that.
Noted. Thank you. Commissioner Weir.
Thank you. I think 2 questions, possibly 3. Well, the first is the first is what's the history of this site? Is it just a holdout and that's how it came to be isolated? I'm seeing nodding heads, so I'll take that as the answer. The second question is what would have prevented? I'm assuming the reason that this is going as a semi-detached instead of 3 townhouses is just math, is that it's less than 75 feet wide and 25 is the minimum required width for a townhouse. Is that, am I right in that read?
Somewhat. In the special exception section for the zoning district, they have certain site minimum site criteria for different housing types. The townhouse development requires a minimum, I believe it's 8,700 square feet, whereas the semi-detached requires a minimum of 6,000 square feet. So this lot just meets the requirement to fit under a semi-detached dwelling.
So you're saying that the board does not have discretion to approve a townhouse below 8,000 square feet? That's the limiting factor?
Correct.
Okay.
The site plan requirements for a lot size determines
Got it.
how much what types of housing types could be built.
That makes sense. Then the third question I have, I noticed that there is in the renderings, there is a second story deck, probably presumably coming out of the kitchen or perhaps out of the living room or dining room. Not deck, excuse me, double sliding door. We have presumably that is there so to advertise the buildability. I'm making a word up. The ability of a buyer to construct a deck or a patio of some kind on that level. But we have a number of rules that sort of govern lot geometry, built geometry, like buildable area or setbacks or permeability or lot coverage. And I guess I want to hear from from staff whether or not there is anything that staff is aware of that would is there any reason to think that buildable area exists on this site for someone to build a deck connected to those swinging doors, sliding doors on the second floor?
Hello. Okay. Yes. The applicant's proposing to build at 51% lot coverage.
Okay.
The zoning ordinance allows them to build up to 51% lot coverage. Additionally, due to conditions, staff has made it possible that a potential homeowner, once they finish their job and they turn it over to somebody to live there, that they could come back in and request a deck without having to go through the painstakingly site plan amendment process. So we've looked at that, and I've reviewed a lot of these things.
Okay.
And so we know what the pain points are and how much they cost. And so we tried to mitigate that through the condition language.
Okay. And for my colleagues, the reason I'm asking is if we ever do get to this lot size study issue, you know, I have heard from people on the BZA and just sort of monitoring BZA hearings that this is a little bit different because we're talking about a site plan site in an R15 district, but an issue that seems to be a percolating one is you've got builders who maximize the buildable area, the lot coverage, and the permeability of the lot, and then also include a sliding double door that then gets advertised as, well, you can build a deck. And then, you know, once the people move in and they decide that they want to build that deck, they find out that there actually is not buildable area left on the lot. And so they think that they are put upon, and then they go to BZA, and BZA rightfully tells them, well, actually, you're not in any sort of situation. You're just like everyone else in this situation, so you don't actually qualify for a variance. And it becomes a percolating issue, no pun intended, given the permeability issues, both for just the general sentiment among single-family homeowners, people living and buying in the R districts, but also for our lot coverage concerns. So just so people know that question isn't completely out of left field. I saw some shuffling from the applicant. If you have thoughts on this, I would appreciate it too.
Yes, I can probably help clarify, at least on this application. We are showing doors on the rear of this house, but we are also showing a deck on the second story.
I did not, I thought that I looked very carefully. Thank you for clarifying that. I didn't see
so
that.
yeah, there wouldn't be a need for anybody to come in and then have to, you know, build a deck after the fact.
Thank you. It looked like a Juliet balcony as I saw it, but thank you for clarifying.
Look, Commissioner Begley? And then Commissioner Steiner, and then I would like to move us to a vote.
Along the lines of where Commissioner Ware was, When you get to the market, and I know it's kind of hard to predict now, what do you think the price for each of these will be, roughly, ballpark?
I think it will be in the low 1 millions. Those are the sales comps in the immediate vicinity. There's a townhouse project nearby, which was recently approved and under construction, and another group.
Thank you. That would have been my guess too in residential real estate. So along the lines of what Commissioner Weir was talking about, I don't think we're ever going to really solve the housing crisis here if we get lots like this and we can't put more than 2 very expensive places there. That neighborhood, with the exception of the new townhouses that are on 11th, mostly is not 1 million range. And it is a very dense area. We'd like to put more people there than not. So as we move forward in the process, there's got to be something we can do because there really should be more people there than these expensive places. Second of all, given the constraints of how small that space is and how narrow the street is, and it's all, RPP in there with the parking, I would hope that you will have ongoing conversations with neighbors as construction starts, because any of the places where we have, as we're driving through these streets, in wider streets than that is, there's always, all of a sudden half the street is gone. There's, chaos going on. It would behoove everybody to have very good conversations about this. Try not to, take away too much of the parking there, because if you've ever been on that street, it's always booked. So I would just encourage you greatly to really stick with the neighbors on the construction end of this. Thank you.
So I want to second those comments as a Gen Z member of this commission who does not have $1 million to throw around. That's a big concern. But anyway, my question is for staff on sidewalks. I know there was the 4-foot minimums that this met. Were there any concerns that those might be too narrow? I know we've had conversations on this commission on the whole about wider sidewalks. So I just wanted to check that real quick.
Because this is not a whole scale redevelopment of a whole block, there wasn't an opportunity to come back and take a look at wider sidewalks here. So what's there today, they will replace in kind, but we are getting enhanced streetscape per se by having the street trees installed along their frontage of the property at the back of sidewalk along the frontage of their property.
Got it. All right, thank you. And I do want to commend you all for going for the duplex option. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to associate myself with Commissioner Lontelmi's concern. I think this is a little bit of the donut problem we had with prescription drugs a while back, where the EHO left sort of this missing middle in the middle, as it were. So I totally agree, and I think it's something that I'd love to also emphasize with staff, that we need to aggressively start thinking and moving on that EHO so it includes this area, or an EHO-like approach, so that we don't have to go through the SPRC. Quick architectural comments. The front of the facade, I agree with staff's assessment. The back, the rear, and the sides are a little bit boxy, needless to say. So anything that you can do to break down that mass, that helps you to relate to the neighborhood a little bit more effectively by breaking down the scale. Quick recommendation: if you do a hip roof instead of a gable on the sides, you can then put a dormer, and that starts to lower the perception of the house. Also, any bay windows or anything that you can put on the side start to project a little 3-dimensionality to it is really helpful. Those are all my comments. Thanks.
And I have one question for staff. Are 2 parking spaces per unit required, or is that a market choice made by the applicant?
The two parking spaces are required by the ordinance.
Could they have asked for fewer, or are they required to have 2?
They could have asked for fewer. That is a modification that the board is allowed to make.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't a requirement that there be 2, that this, if they were making a marketing choice. So, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
to make a motion? Commissioner Peterson?
I move that the Planning Commission recommend that the county board adopt the attached ordinance to approve the subject site plan for 2 semi-detached dwelling units with modifications of zoning ordinance requirements as necessary to achieve the proposed development plan, subject to the conditions of the attached ordinance.
Second.
Commissioner Patel. Any further discussion? Great. Let's get voting. Commissioner Strider,
Oh, I go first tonight. That's great. Aye.
Commissioner Bagley,
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson,
Aye.
Commissioner Patel,
Aye.
Commissioner Weir,
Aye.
Commissioner Lantelmi,
Aye.
Commissioner Sarley,
Aye.
Commissioner Berkey,
Aye.
Commissioner Guevara,
Aye.
Commissioner Robertson,
Aye.
Commissioner Steinberger. Aye. The motion passes unanimously, also known as 11-9. Thank you very much. Are there any other motions for the site? Okay. This matter is concluded. Thank you very much. Appreciation to both staff and applicant, and best of luck. Madam Clerk, can you please call our second item?
Our second item is FBC-35 and N-FBC-21. Also with that is FBC-34 and N-FBC-20, which are both appendized for Columbia Pike Form-Based Code. We have Olivia Santag to present these items this evening.
Can I ask you to delay for one moment? We're passing a wrinkly bag of candy and I don't want to overshadow you. So let's the folks on this side get the candy and then you can start in just 1 second. Is that okay? And also if you'd like some candy, would you like some candy? I had it left over from a work project and I could think of no one else I would rather share it with than my fellow commissioners. So did you guys get, you're putting, candy's going to the kitchen? Wait,
There are also some Girl Scout cookies.
oh, there's also Scout cookies apparently. Okay, we lost Commissioner Weir. Okay. Okay. So again, candy and cookies in the back room. Ms. Sontag, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
All right. So again, let's see. Try to speak into this mic. So my name is Olivia Sontag with the Arlington County Planning Division. I'm joined this evening also by Matt Matuzik, also from the Planning Division, and Paul Roman from our Department of Environmental Services Green Building Program. So for your consideration tonight, our zoning ordinance amendments to Appendix A and B, the Columbia Pike Commercial and Neighborhoods Form-Based Codes, to update the green building standards for development projects that decide to develop using either code, which are optional zoning tools. So again, this is the item for your consideration, an ordinance to amend to update the green building standards in both of those codes, and I could pull this up again later. So here's a snapshot of the Columbia Pike Form-Based Code boundaries, with Columbia Pike running east to west through those areas. The yellow and blue areas represent commercial and neighborhood Form-Based Code boundaries. If a property is located within any of these areas, they have the option to either redevelop using the underlying zoning, or they can apply for a Form-Based Code use permit where they must comply with the prescriptive requirements of the respective code. The idea being that the expectations are preset, and unlike site plans, do not have the option to earn additional density or negotiate community benefits. Like site plans, form-based code use permits include a very similar set of standard conditions of approval, which is how, for example, green building standards are enforced and monitored. So to start with some background, the county's green building incentive policy does not apply to the Columbia Pike form-based codes and form-based code projects. And these proposed amendments reflect the need to right-size the standards for Columbia Pike development. So the commercial code, which was adopted in 2003, does not currently have any minimum green building requirements, although we do require submission of a scorecard. And as you'll see in the report, we do have a few proposals that have voluntarily pursued certifications. The Neighborhoods Code, adopted 10 years later in 2013, currently requires as high as LEED Silver, depending on the the building envelope designation. And review of the form-based code green building standards began earlier this year with the green building program staff, and we've arrived at a staff recommendation to update the standards in both of the codes. So we arrived at this recommendation after consultations with the county's inspection services division, the housing division, current planning site plan review team, staff in neighboring jurisdictions, and some industry professionals that are familiar with form-based code development on the Pike. So again, though voluntary, 4 of the 17 commercial form-based code development projects approved have provided varying levels of green building certifications listed here. And then all 8 of the neighborhoods form-based code projects have included green building certifications. Most, as you'll see, opting for LEED Silver, but 2 100% affordable housing projects which opted for Earthcraft Gold. So from consultations with staff, and again, those neighboring jurisdictions in Alexandria and Fairfax, some other industry professionals, architects that have worked on previous projects on the Pike, we've learned that it would be important to include a variety and some flexibility for certification options, also to include outcome-based standards rather than just the prescriptive requirements, and also to require Energy Star certification. Specific to projects on Columbia Pike, they typically score well in categories for transportation, location, development footprint, and open space, which in the form-based code requires between 15 to 25% of the buildable area to be designated as open space. And then rainwater management was another category that scored well. We also heard from housing staff and affordable housing developers that Earthcraft Gold and LEED Gold are the minimum requirement to earn Virginia Housing Application Points. And then in previous development projects, we've seen LEED certification and LEED Silver targeted without incentives, so we know it's becoming increasingly mutually beneficial. We're aware of the pending update to LEED version 5, but there's still an unknown timeline for this. So this recommendation is based off of version 4. And then based on discussions with other jurisdictions and other professionals, and then review of previous project scorecards that have been submitted, we believe this 10-point gap between LEED Silver up to LEED Gold is manageable when it's targeted early in the process. We also heard that the LEED process can be lengthy and expensive, which is why we're also including Earthcraft as a certification option, which is also currently offered in the Green Building Incentive Policy. So again, based on this feedback and analysis, the recommendation also includes outcome-based standards rather than just the form or prescriptive requirements for each building envelope standard site or BES site. So these BES sites distinguish the parameters for development on each site in terms of height, siting, elements, and use. So as you'll see here, for multifamily and mixed use sites, staff is proposing to elevate the green building standards in both codes to LEED Gold, Earthcraft Gold, or an alternative certification path that's equivalent in stringency. And those applications would be reviewed by our green building staff to ensure that they are equivalent. And then we also proposed a requirement for Energy Star certification, energy optimization requirements, which are also provided in the Green Building Incentive Policy, and then additional prerequisites modeled after the GBIP. For lower density site designations, we recommend LEED or Earthcraft certification or an equivalent certification, as well as that Energy Star certification. So the energy optimization options listed here are reflective of those in the automatic update in the GBIP, which took effect in June of 2023. And then the additional prerequisites are listed on the slide here, which include Energy Star appliances and fixtures, WaterSense plumbing fixtures, refrigerant leakage, equity, diversity, and inclusion program, energy benchmarking, air sealing, ventilation supply and exhaust, EV charging infrastructure, human interaction with nature or biophilia, bird-friendly materials, renewable energy, and light pollution reduction. And these are all further detailed in that attachment 1 to the board report. So the proposed amendments were presented to NAOP back in October, and then ZOCO and the Form-Based Code Advisory Working Group, all with very few questions and general support at the time. NAOP then sent a letter in December encouraging the county to incrementally increase and phase in any of these new building requirements. So in consideration of this, staff is recommending the amendments take effect on May 1st of 2024, which is the same delay that was offered when the GBIP was adopted in 2020. And then after a presentation to C2E2 in December, they also provided a letter which recommended the county board postpone approval of this amendment so it could be revised to be fully consistent with the county's goals for carbon neutrality, reflect the best practices for zero carbon buildings, and align with a future update of the green building incentive policy. So staff appreciates the recommendations, and we are going to consider how the current review process might be improved and might benefit from some of these suggestions, but we're maintaining the recommendation to adopt the amendments, which we feel apply a balanced approach to increasing the minimum green building standards for development projects utilizing both of the form-based codes in the near term. The county board approved the request to advertise in December, and the proposed amendments will go to the county board for consideration on February 24th. So again, I have the recommendation from staff available here, which is that the ordinance be, that you adopt the ordinance to amend, reenact, and recodify Appendix A and Appendix B of the zoning ordinance to update the green building standards for development projects utilizing the Columbia Pike Form-Based Code as shown in Attachment 1 with an effective date of May 1st, 2024. That concludes my presentation, and myself and Matt Matuzik and Paul Roman are available for questions.
Thank you very much. Do we have any, Madam Chair? Do we have a Madam Clerk? Do we have? I'm Madam Chair.
I'll take the chair. Okay. Ms. McIntyre is here to speak.
Thank you. We got to where I was going with that. Welcome, Ms. McIntyre.
Good evening. I'm Joan McIntyre, representing the Climate Change, Energy, and Environment Commission. C2E2 appreciates this long overdue effort to add sustainability requirements to the Columbia Pike form-based codes, but nevertheless recommends that approval be delayed so that they can be enhanced to better align with the county's carbon neutrality goal. The proposed changes match the minimum for participation under the Green Building Incentive Policy. C2E2 has repeatedly noted that these requirements fall short of what is required to meet the county's climate goals and, more importantly, phase out fossil fuels to avoid the worst consequences of the climate crisis. To align with the goal, new construction must be highly energy efficient, reflecting the best practices for building performance, be all electric, fossil gas systems baking greenhouse gas emissions for more than a decade, while electric systems can get cleaner as the grid shifts to renewable energy. Maximize rooftop solar and encourage battery storage for resiliency. Include needed infrastructure to allow for at least 50% of parking spaces to be EV ready to accommodate the shift to electric vehicles. Minimize the total carbon footprint by selecting low carbon construction materials and responsible management of construction debris. The revision to the form-based code could allow development to better align with the county's broader goals for tree canopy coverage, stormwater management, and reduction in urban heat island impact. Greater transparency in the estimated utility costs for residents and businesses, as well as anticipated life cycle carbon emissions, could incentivize more environmentally conscious design. The Green Building Incentive Policy is expected to be updated this year, so it's likely this revised ordinance will soon be outdated anyway. At a minimum, they should be really establishing a minimum to update the form-based codes as needed to reflect emerging best practices for building design and construction standards. The original intent for the form-based code to incentivize redevelopment along Columbia Pike has been successful. Now should be the time to revisit the purpose of the form-based code and make it a tool to meet broader county goals for addressing the climate crisis, ensuring resiliency, enhancing the natural environment, housing, and other goals. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, was that our only help? Okay, great. The matter is now with the commission. Did any of our commissions hear this item? No, again, none. Okay. So who has the report for this? Commissioner Weir?
No report. It did go before the zoning committee, and I'll leave that person to that, but it also went before the form-based code area working group, where it was, as is noted in the staff report, entirely uncontroversial. I mean, there was a desire that there be more CAFs, but I don't know that I don't remember that being suggested in any, that comment being made in any way that would be quantified or operationalized in the form of amendments. Ms. Sontag will correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that that's,
Okay.
I'm there.
Okay, understood and appreciated. The matter is now with the commission. First hand I saw was Commissioner Sarli.
Sorry, no, I was just going to apologize. I was processing the information we were just receiving, and I sort of wasn't listening to you when you asked for it did come in front of the ZOCO. So thank you, Commissioner Weir, for covering for me on that one. Nothing to report. I mean, it was generally met with strong support, and we feel very good about this.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Bagley.
I guess I just have a procedural question. Given Ms. McIntyre's comments that this is falling short of where they believe it should be, and watching some of the board members give out their plans for this year, and many of them talked about climate change and addressing all these issues and being much more sensitive or even more strict with it. Can you explain, is this an attempt to get it closer and then that's okay? Or why is there such a discrepancy with a commission wanting this to be deferred? Thank you.
So I'll start, and then I have my colleagues online if anyone else wants to jump in. But the level of additional density offered under the form-based code as compared, above what the underlying zoning offers compared to site plans elsewhere in the county is quite different. So there is, there is only a smaller, amount of commitments that can be exchanged when opting into the form-based code versus the kind of level of additional density that might be offered for other site plan projects. So, and then the other note is just that right now under the commercial code, we're starting with no expectations for green building standards. So already we're hearing, that this is quite a jump. We've been briefing, any projects, developers that we've been talking to about potential projects about this forthcoming amendment. So they are prepared, but it is, a significant change from what's been expected, on the previous 17 projects that we've reviewed under the form-based code.
So a follow-up question. So given this is, I guess, a baby step towards, or a bigger baby step towards getting in the direction of where, C2E2 sees this, and where others on the board especially have said that they wish to see this go, would this be something that would be reviewed again in a couple years to see if we couldn't maybe up the ante a little bit? I mean, it's really in everybody's best interest, regardless of being at the lower end of the expectations now. I'm just curious. Thank you.
I see Matt Matuzik has popped on screen, so I'll let him follow up on that last question and maybe address this one.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I mean, this is a very interesting question, and I think based on what Olivia just mentioned, if we've had about 20 years of development activity on Columbia Pike that absolutely had zero standards for sustainability, introducing the level of commitments that you just saw in the presentation is quite a big leap compared to where we were starting from. So I think there's an acknowledgement that's needed there in terms of meeting, I think, some of the objectives we've heard from various board members and their priorities for this year. But I think there's also two other elements I want everybody to consider. There is a lost opportunity or an opportunity cost of delaying this, in that any upcoming projects that we have are going to essentially continue the perpetual lack of commitments because we don't have a minimum standard in place. So anything that's coming up in our active queue next year, who knows for how much longer, that's going to be at risk in terms of making sure that we have something in place. And this is what I think the purpose of this amendment is to make sure we at least have a starting point, given that we don't have a density negotiation system in place on Columbia Pike. There's also, I think, a bigger point to make here, and that, if I really were to answer this accurately, has to address the false equivalency that's embedded in that question or issue. And that has to do with the fact that the GBIP, as it applies throughout the county, deals with a lot of development activity that's concentrated along the metro corridors, where you have taller building heights, and properties can yield significantly larger rents or leases depending on the use. In contrast, the Columbia Pike corridor is not served by Metro, despite its robust bus service, and historically continues to yield significantly lower rents compared to the sites along the Metro corridors. So given these understood market conditions, a singular countywide green building standard simply does not represent an equitable approach and likely hinder our ability to realize the revitalization goals for Columbia Pike. So this is a long-winded way of acknowledging that even if the GBIP were to be updated at some future time to include slightly higher standards compared to today, that resulting difference between where they end up and where we are with our proposed amendment doesn't necessarily mean that we're incompatible with that policy. It simply represents another tier where Columbia Pike sits that is right-sized for that corridor, given the factors that we just mentioned, and the fact that there are no density negotiations to be had with this specific zoning tool.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Bagley, did that address? Okay. Anyone else wishing to be heard on this topic? Commissioner Schreiner?
Yeah, so I noticed in the slides that there was a difference in the sort of requirements for multifamily, multi-use, and then the townhomes and that kind of thing. It was the additional prerequisites and the energy optimization. I was wondering why those were only on the multifamily and not on the townhouse actions or items.
So I'll let Paul Roman supplement this, but generally a lot of those, some of those lower density townhome style developments won't be using the same, Earthcraft scorecard or LEED level scorecards. They'll be using, they won't be using the multifamily scorecards. They might be using the mid-range development or lower. And those additional energy optimization requirements and the prerequisites just did not seem appropriate for some of those development typologies. But let Paul Roman elaborate if he would like to.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thanks, Olivia. Not too much to add to that. You pretty much nailed that, but yeah, in summary of what Olivia was saying, for a multifamily development, if you're speaking of a mid-rise apartment building, usually with these certifications such as LEED and dealing with the energy optimization standards, you're looking at either 5 or 6 stories or more for a multifamily mid-rise building. When you're looking at different systems obviously involved, speaking of energy systems, I should say, but when you're looking at something such as a townhome or even something significantly smaller, obviously your systems are smaller and they don't fit within the certification framework of what is being proposed. And it would also be based on where the market or the energy market is right now, just based on discussions with developers and projects that we see come through the county. It would be difficult for them to achieve those energy optimization thresholds compared to a larger development, such as a multifamily mid-rise.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, and thank you both. I did want to associate myself with Commissioner Bagley as well. I think, and I agree with Mr. Matuzik's comments that this is I would say this is a young adult step, not quite the baby step, but it's a significant improvement, and I think it's good to revisit it as we do with all of our plans here in the county. So I think this is great for as a first, young adult step towards these sort of carbon neutral goals.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? It's Commissioner Sarli? Nope. Oh, Commissioner Peterson, apologies.
Oh, that's it. Question about the timeline for possible updates that my colleagues referred to. C2E2 recommended possibly doing an update every 5 years. Do you have an idea in mind about how often you would do these updates to kind of strengthen it in the future, both for this policy as well as the green building incentive policy?
I think for now it would be on an, as needed basis. This item was on our work plan for a number of years, and we're glad to have, tackled it at this point. But certainly once the GBIP is adopted, we can revisit what's included in that plan and compare it to what's been adopted here for the form-based code.
Great. Just wanted to, note, as C2E2 mentioned, our community energy plan goals are set very high, but we also have a lot of threats coming to our community because of climate change. And so if we can just make sure that we are planning in advance to ramp up these policies, I think it makes sense for today that we are approving this as is. Something is better than nothing, as Mr. Matusik was alluding to. And this does seem like a reasonable approach to making sure we can continue seeing Columbia Pike redevelop. But ultimately, we do need to get stronger policies going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Peterson. Commissioner Bagley?
Just one final thing. The folks who are going to be living or are currently living or whatever's happening in that particular pocket of Columbia Pike have all the right of everybody who lives in Roslyn or Ballston, because it's a more dense area. They have all the right to have all the energy efficiency and all the extra things, all the bells and whistles that are in every other place or that we fight so hard for. So I really do hope that we keep revisiting this and reminding people who are stakeholders in this and maybe giving you pushback. It's really for everybody's benefit, but I almost feel like it's already inequitable on Columbia Pike that they're not even, hey, this is great, this is better than it was, but it's really inequitable, I think, with some of the other areas. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other commissioners wishing to be heard on this item? Commissioner Sarli, and then I will be looking to you for a motion. But to read the motion after you make your comment.
Okay. The only thing I will say is a little bit of a comment on, sorry, let me I got a little distracted here. The notion of environmental impact in the construction that raises the level also has a affordability contingency. There's a causality here. It's one thing to have a rent or even buy into a place, but then like the month-to-month cost of paying all the electrical bills and the water bills and so on and so forth, also impact the affordability of the unit. Thank you.
Thank you. Are any other commissioners wishing to be heard on this item? Okay. Since this was heard by Zoko, I thought it made sense to have you read the motion, but
sure. Let me pull it up.
Okay. Can we get it on the screen again, Ms. Sontag?
Yes.
Would you do that for me? Thank you.
It's not just for you, it's for all of us.
For the planning.
You get to
commission.
read it.
Thank you. And also the.
Thank you, though.
Thank you, Ms. Sontag. All right, I move that the Planning Commission recommend that the County Board adopt the attached ordinance to amend, reenact, recodify Appendix A, Columbia Pike Commercial Form-Based Code, and Appendix B, Columbia Pike Neighborhoods Form-Based Code of the Arlington County Zoning Ordinance to update the green building standards for development project utilizing the Columbia Pike Form-Based Codes as shown in Attachment 1 with an effective date of May 1st, 2024.
Is there a second?
Second.
That was Commissioner Steiner. Thank you. Any discussion? Would anyone like to speak to the motion? Okay, in that case, we will move forward to a vote. I never start on the other side. Okay, Commissioner Robertson.
Aye.
Aye. Commissioner Guevara,
Aye.
Commissioner Berkey,
Aye.
Commissioner Sarli,
Aye.
Commissioner Lantelmi,
Aye.
Commissioner Weir,
Aye.
Commissioner Patel,
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson,
Aye.
Commissioner Bagley,
Aye.
Commissioner Steiner,
Aye.
Commissioner Me. Aye. The motion carries unanimously, 11-0. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, am I correct that items 2 and 3 were just heard together? Okay, so I believe we were now on item, would you call the next item, please? No?
Sorry, we have
No, I
another.
still need to
No,
read it.
there's another motion. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I
That was
still need to
not,
read
never
it.
mind. Just kidding. Back to Ms. Sontag.
When I
As you
said
were.
together earlier, I meant she was presenting both items is what I meant to say. Okay. Item number 3, FBC-34 and N-FBC-20 is also amendments to the Arlington County zoning ordinance regarding form-based code. We have Olivia Sontag to present this item as well.
Thank you, Giselle.
Absolutely.
So again, I'm joined by Matt Matuzik virtually for questions on this one as well. This one's much more simple. It's largely technical, but still very important. So there are several changes proposed in this amendment, but the primary objective is to address affordability requirements for elder care uses in the neighborhood's form-based code. So again, this is the item for consideration, and we can bring this back up in a little bit. So some background to start. Elder care uses, which generally include independent living, assisted living, continuing care, and nursing homes, have not always been listed in the zoning ordinance or the form-based codes. But in 2019, the county board approved zoning ordinance amendments, which inadvertently excluded elder care uses from being introduced into both of the form-based codes. So in September 2023, this was remedied and elder care uses were introduced into both of the codes. But at that time, specific parking standards and adjustments to the affordability requirements were not assessed. So currently there are no affordability requirements for development projects in the commercial code, but the neighborhoods code requires on-site committed affordable units for residential development, including elder care. And a cash contribution to AHIF for commercial development projects. So again, here's a quick snapshot of the Columbia Pike form-based code boundaries. Columbia Pike running east to west through the spine of these areas. This amendment primarily aims to address the elder care affordability requirements in the neighborhood's form-based code, which is shown in blue, but also addresses some of the parking and bicycle parking requirements in both codes. So there is a continued interest that we've heard in developing elder care facilities along Columbia Pike, but we know that the code's parking and affordable housing standards are tailored for typical multifamily residential projects and should be adjusted to account for the high cost and service needs of elder care facilities. Although we know that on-site CAFs are needed and preferred, and we did hear this desire at meetings with the zoning committee, the Commission on Aging, and the Form-Based Code Advisory Working Group at their meetings. Through our analysis, we've learned that a comprehensive response to establishing required subsidies for elder care uses will need to involve support from the General Assembly and Governor on legislation to amend the Code of Virginia, which is where Arlington's Affordable Housing Ordinance is also codified. So until these steps can occur, staff recommends enabling the cash contribution option to match the existing contribution calculations allowed for commerce and retail projects. The contribution is currently based on $1 per square foot of GFA within the first 1.0 of floor area ratio, and then a separate ratio for GFA greater than 1.0 FAR. We're also proposing to keep the option for developers to provide on-site units for elder care development projects in lieu of the cash contribution, but recognize that under the current requirements, developers must provide a minimum of 20% of the net new units as on-site committed affordable units, which we're hearing is currently infeasible. And just for some examples, the recently approved site plan Sunrise South Glebe Assisted Living Facility, which is not within the form-based code, but is very near to Columbia Pike, proposed 99 units and had the option as a site plan to provide a cash contribution or for one on-site or one off-site unit, which is 1% of the overall unit count. And then comparatively, some past neighborhoods form-based code residential developments have been required to provide upwards of 8, 23, and 26% committed affordable units as a percent of the overall unit count. And then as a technical cleanup, we're also proposing to explicitly list civic uses under the cash contribution options, as these projects do not contain residential units. So staff is also proposing to update the elder care parking requirements to resemble the existing requirements in the zoning ordinance, and then also update the bicycle parking requirements to resemble existing requirements for hotel uses. So for the commercial and neighborhoods form-based codes, they do not currently distinguish elder care uses from conventional multifamily townhome uses. So the residential minimum parking requirement is 1.125 spaces per unit, and modifications to parking are not allowable under either code. But in the zoning ordinance, currently there are parking requirements for elder care uses, which is a 0.5 parking space per bedroom for independent living, assisted living, and continuing care uses, and a 0.5 space per bed for nursing home uses. But in those cases, for a special exception site plan process, modifications to parking are allowable. So in consideration of the modification restraint, and then also some available regional parking ratio data for elder care facilities, and a parking ratio reduction that was recently granted to the Sunrise South Glebe site plan, parking staff at the county recommends a 0.4 parking spaces per bedroom for the independent, assisted, and continuing care uses, and 0.4 spaces per bed for the nursing home uses. And then additionally, they're recommending 1 employee bicycle parking space per 10 beds and 1 visitor space per 50 beds. So the proposed amendments have been reviewed by the Zoning Committee, Commission on Aging, and Form-Based Code Advisory Working Group, where general support was expressed. The Zoning Committee and Commission on Aging members asked staff to verify the feasibility of requiring on-site committed affordable units instead of a cash contribution, but did acknowledge the high subsidies required to accomplish any level of on-site affordability. So staff's research suggests that elder care uses require a more nuanced approach to support the inclusion of committed affordable units, and the percent of units and the length of that commitment expected would all need to be studied further to achieve meaningful levels of affordability. Additionally, any of those changes to the existing affordability options codified in the zoning ordinance would require support from the General Assembly and Governor on legislation to amend the Code of Virginia. So following the December County Board meeting for the request to advertise, the proposed amendments will also go to the Housing Commission this Thursday and then to the County Board for consideration on February 24th. That concludes my presentation, and happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sontag. Do we have any public speakers on this item? Okay, well, there could have been a virtual one. Okay, do we have a report from Zelco or
Ms.
from my code or
Sontag
anything?
captured it perfectly. I don't have anything to add. I think we had this conversation. I feel like we had this conversation in this commission when we were talking about Sunrise. I think it started there, so you all might remember that. But yeah, Ms. Sontag captured everything. I don't have much to add. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would any members of the commission like to be heard on this item? I will acknowledge my, oh, sure. Oh, sure, Commissioner Begley, and then I will call on myself. Thank you.
I know this is again something, like continue to improve on this, and it is a step forward. But in the elderly community, especially in this area, it's a struggle for many to even stay in this area for continued care or assisted living or anything. It's outrageously expensive. And to see where we in writing say, and I understand all that, but I think somewhere down the line from the 30,000-foot view, we've got to try to get away from, or at least encourage people from, developers or applicants from coming in and just giving cash versus doing something, 1 unit, 2 units, whatever we can beg for. Because, you know, if you've stayed here your whole life, you can't stay here anymore. And we're not, with wording like that, it concerns me that we're just making the inevitable choice for somebody that they really can't. You know, 1 unit would help somebody be able to stay here. So that, it bothers me to see that. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate the comment, and I think we all know this is not isolated to Columbia Pike. This is an issue that I think the county's looking into addressing countywide. So we're hoping that, again, it's going to require a lot of further study, and there are some other hurdles and barriers that exist right now to making any progress on that front, but it's definitely something that we're interested in revisiting.
So I will acknowledge myself. I really would like to echo what Commissioner Begley has just said. It's troubling to me that, first off, I think this is a necessary step in the right direction, and certainly we want to make it easier for assisted living facilities and for elder care endeavors to come to Arlington, and making these changes to the form-based code is an important move in that direction. So I'm pleased to see this step forward. And certainly some of the changes that we're looking to make to the code, specific for those types of businesses, make a lot of sense. Reducing the parking ratio, yes, most residents in an assisted living facility are not bringing their own car. That's just, reality. But when it comes to sort of, what we're doing in terms of a cash contribution versus setting aside units on site, I think this is a situation where even 1 to 2 units, or, depending on, based on like kind of size of the property and what it would go a very long way to helping to, as Commissioner Bagley eloquently said, allowing our aging population to age in place, should they so desire. And we're really sort of not meaningfully making strides to alleviate that challenge in a way that I think is appropriate yet. And so I understand the county board, and we're going to look at this more on a countywide basis, but I think that I'm toying with how I would phrase a motion that the sense of this body, should there be interest, is that we do continue to explore that, and that's something that this commission is interested in pursuing. So if fellow commissioners have thoughts on that, I'd love to hear them. And if anyone would like to be acknowledged for anything else, related to that or otherwise, I'd love to hear that too. So does anyone else wish to be acknowledged on the topic before us? I can't see. Commissioner Berkey, and then Commissioner Guevara.
Thank you. So I'll bring the lead up front. I'll be happy to support a motion on this, but I'm glad we're talking about the on-site units. So I've spent like 7.5 years in the Housing Commission. I don't think there was a single meeting we had where we didn't talk about this in some, form or fashion. And I appreciate that staff thinks about it constantly, and it's a constant source of, I think, public discussion. My view here is that trying to, solve our affordability challenges through a few units through the form-based code is not going to get us where we want to be, not even close. I definitely appreciate the sentiments, but it's pretty clear that this is not an effective way for us to get affordable units, and it's probably not an effective way for us to get elder care units that we need. And in fact, this could be disincentivizing the elder care that we need, and which is why I think staff is proposing this. I think that being said, it's certainly worth this body's consideration to think about to think bigger. We have an ordinance that's been in place for about 20 years. There's certainly a lot of active interest within the community. That is something that requires legislative changes, certainly county board input. It is a large conversation. But in my view, we're not going to get where we want by simply tinkering with the form-based code. It's a bigger conversation about developers paying their fair share for affordable housing, thinking about on-site, what that looks like. And with elder care, as Ms. Sontag was alluding to, that by itself is even more complicated conversation than simply affordable housing. And so maybe that's something that we as a body think about, because there are certainly a lot of folks in our community who are, I think, actively thinking about that as well. Thanks.
Commissioner Guevara, and then I will go to Commissioner Weir.
I know, it's interesting. The first meeting I had here was with Sunrise, and I remember them saying that it was the North Arlington location, and then they said they were going to possibly do some on-site units in South Arlington, and then the South Arlington came, and then they said they wouldn't do it, and it sort of just seems like they're passing the buck, right? I was just reading an article from the Washington Post just that they published in December, and they were talking about how some of these big organization or companies, they were paying their CEOs $75 million. And so this idea, this notion that, they can't provide these extra services, particularly in an industry where they're hiring people of colors and immigrants, and they're paying them $16, $17 an hour. And we're not having, granted, these are, private companies, we can't tell them what to say, but I do think that we have a responsibility to our community to stand up and actually say, and that, that we do want people to age in place. And granted, I'm not saying form-based code is necessarily how we're going to, fix all these issues, but I do think that we have a responsibility, and that we need to push forward some of these, whether it's on-site, or whether it's bigger policy proposals that we put forward, but something's got to give, and we just need to hold them more accountable. I'm not sure what the solution is, but just this notion that there's no way they can make the equation work just doesn't sit well with me. I don't think it's right, and I think something needs to be done.
I want to, not only do I want to echo Commissioner Berkey's comments, but I want to take it in a slightly different direction, which is to point out that, we have this document that we call a form-based code, but in so many ways acts as a use-based code with design guidelines, right? I mean, how many times have we now been here discussing, well, here's a new potential use that's been identified for the form-based code, and in a lot of ways, I think if we're serious about protecting existing community servicing businesses, if we are serious about getting out of the way of construction of housing, if we are serious about facilitating innovative and novel kinds of retail and retail equivalents, a conversation that I think is worth having. I'm not sure where I would, if this conversation were to be had, I'm not sure where I would fall on it, but a conversation that would be having, we should be having is it not enough of a form-based code, right? Do we actually need to go the direction of making it more of a form-based code and less of a use-based code, where we keep having to come and identify and weigh in on novel uses? That's not a conversation for tonight, but I wanted to put it in people's heads nonetheless. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd like to take this conversation to a little bit of a different direction, but it also goes directly to affordability. What is the basis for the 0.4 parking ratio? Where did that number come from?
So it partially comes from some regional parking data for other elder care facilities available to our Department of Environmental Services parking staff. So they arrived at that that 0.4 parking ratio based on some of the provided parking numbers for those different facilities. It also takes into consideration the fact that these parking standards cannot be modified as compared to special exception site plan use or permits, which can. So that was part of the justification. And then we also looked at any kind of formerly approved elder care facilities. I mean, one of the more recently approved ones was the Sunrise on South Glebe, and that one was approved for a parking reduction from 0.5 down to 0.44.
And that
spaces
number
per
is a
unit.
rigid number. It's, you can't make more and you can't provide less. Is that correct?
Sorry, can you ask that? Can you clarify?
0.4 ratio is a fixed ratio in that you can't go to 0.5 or down to 0.3.
It's a minimum.
It's a minimum. They could do more, but they can't do less.
Correct.
Okay. Why do we have it at all? Why don't we have a maximum and say, and rely upon these people who are in this business and know how it works to provide the amount of parking that they feel they need to make their project successful and let them take the risk? The reason I'm asking is this is all going to be structured parking. It's $50,000 a stall. That goes directly to the bottom line. They have every incentive to get it right because otherwise they can't run their facility. But it also locks them in because we're dealing with not just one type of elder care. If there's memory units, of course, none of those residents are going to have cars, but there's going to be more staff that are going to be necessary. If it's assisted living, some, but few of their residents will have cars. There will be way fewer staff on that. Independent living, you could have a significant number, but not by no means most having cars, but very few, relatively few staff, almost like a hotel in the ratios there. And this can change. They could, over the course of the lifetime of this building, which could be, let's say, 50 years, they could change the mix depending on the demand, the need, yet the parking stays the same. I would much rather allow them to say we have a maximum of 0.1, or I mean, sorry, maximum of 1.0, and let them have anything down to 0. Let them decide it. I don't see any reason why we as a county have to have a parking ratio that sets a minimum. They know their business best. A Sunrise in far north Arlington, away from any transit, may need a higher ratio for staff than one that was in the middle of Roslyn, let's say. So, and again, they're not form-based code, but this would apply really to any elder care throughout the county. Certainly the form-based code shouldn't be any different. At one end of the Columbia Pike, it could be very different than at a different one. I really personally don't feel we need to have a set amount, and I don't see that it does violence to the form-based code to simply say park however you want. No more than 1.0, but anything under that, your call. I don't see how that violates the spirit or the application of the form-based code.
Thank you, Commissioner Lantelli. Ms. Sontag, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, thank you for the comment. I think right now, the way that, other parking standards are applied to other uses, they're all applied as a minimum. So this just makes it consistent in that sense. And we are also trying to make some of these requirements for elder care facilities consistent with our current, with our zoning ordinance. So that's the effort moving forward right now, but I do appreciate the comment, and certainly we're always trying to think more creatively about parking standards.
Yeah, the consistency gives me a real trouble because that means we'll never change it. And we really need to, as a county, need to be thinking about moving from parking minimums to parking maximums. We're an urban environment now, and we need to be looking at maximums. We routinely drop Developers always come in here and ask for less, and we always grant it. We need to move to maximums rather than minimums, and to say we have to be consistent. We don't have to be consistent. We can start moving where it makes sense to start moving it to maximums. Thank you.
Oh, thanks. It sounded funny. So I feel a little bit concerned about this discussion. And usually, Jim, when you talk about parking, I don't really say too much. This time I'm going to say something because I think this is the other side of Commissioner Guevara's comment. And I think typically my comments about having cultural shifts in this community. And until you can achieve the shift where everybody is doing what needs to be done to achieve the public good, I worry about bringing it down to nothing. And then this is a vulnerable population where there are very specific needs, right? For staff, for the individuals who live there, for their families. Until we're able to make certain shifts about attending to the needs of the individuals who are in a space like a assisted living or an elder care facility, having no minimum makes me very worried for that. Again, it's the same conversation we have for affordable housing, right? Do better. Don't just do the minimum. Do more of what you need to do. We're asking everybody to do more. In this situation, we're asking them to do better, but we can't take away the baseline. That's makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable for this. But I also think, because I don't want us to get down a rabbit hole here on this particular issue, because I feel like it's already happening and the train is leaving the track and we are not trying to do that. I think that the conversation can be for another day. I just wanted to kind of say that to you because you've said something about the shifting the conversation. I think that just falls in line with everything else we've been saying from this dais to developers, to applicants. Do more because we need more, right?
But we don't need more parking. That's what I'm trying to say.
I understand that. I understand what you're saying, but I don't think that we, even to your point about let them decide because they'll know best, they may need more. They may need more than 0.4. Who knows?
Oh, no, I agree with that. I agree with
right?
that. I agree with that. That's what I'm saying. If you're going to do a maximum, move it up to 1.0.
I hear you.
Absolutely. I have no argument with that at all.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of maximums.
Yeah.
Figure out what it is and use the money saved by not building it. That could help subsidize affordable units. That could make things more affordable. When you're not building for cars, you can instead build for people.
If it were happening that way, right? If it were happening that way. Okay, thank you.
In the spirit of doing, the theme tonight is sort of putting something on the board and gradually building, maybe this is just a thought I had, maybe instead of having, a minimum or a maximum, you could have a sort of range, for these sort of parking requirements, a minimum of, 0.3, 0.4, and then a maximum of like 0.8, just so we're kind of moving in that direction, but we're not, like you said, I agree with you, Commissioner Patel, that we're still a very car-centric society and you can't just turn that off, and as much as we'd like to in some cases, but the reality of it is that many people are still car dependent, and it's going to continue that way for, however long. So I think there's a sort of potential of a range to kind of move us in that direction that Commissioner Lantelmi is getting to.
Just 2 points of general observation that we could eliminate every parking minimum in the country effective tomorrow, and it is the car-centeredness of our society that would prevent new projects from coming in without parking. That is the philosophical and legal distinction between a parking minimum and a proposed parking ratio. To Commissioner Patel's point, a way that I think that is the strongest argument in this case against eliminating against doing away with a parking minimum. I don't know that I am persuaded by it, but I do think it's the strongest argument. And I think that another way that we might have our conversation, rather than sort of a dyadic, do we have a parking minimum or not, or quibbling about it's not a quibble or getting into the weeds about what the parking minimum would be. Could be what is the departure from the current market rate, and Ms. Sontag, I heard you say the very beginning of what you said was that, if I remember hearing it correctly, was that it begins with an assessment of what the existing parking ratios are, right? And it might be that the way that we quantify our values for something like this or something else is to say, well, how much better than the current situation do we want to be, right? We don't necessarily need to go to no parking minimums at all. It's sufficient perhaps to say, well, we actually think that our project should have a minimum, not a maximum, maybe a maximum, but a minimum of, X percentage of what the current rate is. If it's currently 0.4, we want it to be 0.3 because we think it's appropriate to aspire to be 25% better than average, right? That's another way that we could go about having the discussion at such time as the discussion is ripe to be had. Not tonight, but I wanted to offer that sort of lens.
Thank you. I believe we're ready for a motion. Could you do the screen thingy again? And I will look again to Commissioner Sarli for said motion. Did you want to be heard on something before the motion?
Sure, I'll get started, Ms. Sontag. I think this time I was ready.
Thanks.
I move that the Planning Commission recommend that the county board adopt the attached ordinance to amend, reenact, and recodify the Arlington County Zoning Ordinance Appendix A, Columbia Pike Commercial Form-Based Code, and Appendix B, Columbia Pike Neighborhood Form-Based Code, to establish elder care vehicle parking requirements, elder care bicycle parking requirements, and update the affordability requirements for elder care development projects utilizing the Columbia Pike Neighborhoods Form-Based Code as shown in Attachment 1.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Weir. Thank you. The matter is now with the commission. Any discussion on the motion in front of us? We'll move to wait. Yep. Okay. We will move to a vote on this item. Commissioner Robertson.
Aye.
Commissioner Guevara. Commissioner Berkey.
Aye.
Commissioner Sarli.
Aye.
Commissioner Lantelmi.
Aye.
Commissioner Weir.
Aye.
Commissioner Patel.
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson.
Aye.
Commissioner Bagley.
Aye.
Commissioner Streiner.
Aye.
Commissioner Steinberger votes aye. The motion carries 11-0, also known as unanimously. I am gonna make one additional motion for the benefit of the committee here, and we'll see what happens. It is the sense of the Planning Commission that we should have a county-wide study for how to meaningfully increase the amount of committed affordable assisted care units in Arlington. If anyone felt like seconding that motion or discussing it, this is the opportunity. Okay, seconded by Commissioner Sarli. Thank you. Again, since I did not float this to the commission ahead of time, I'll repeat, it is the sense of the Planning Commission that we should have a county-wide study for how to meaningfully increase the amount of committed affordable assisted care units in Arlington. We frequently come back to how do we encourage developers to increase the amount of on-site affordable units on regular properties. I think that the requirements and challenges of specifically assisted care facilities are a bit different and may require a specific set of circumstances to be considered, a specific set of study. And I'd like, my sense is that we should encourage the county board to move in that direction, specifically with regards to assisted care facilities and how we can encourage the ability for our aging residents to age in place in Arlington. So with that in mind, if there's any further discussion, yep, Commissioner Weir, and then Commissioner Lantelmi.
A question for Ms. Sontag or Mr. Matuzik or Mr. Pfeiffer. To what extent does this would such a study dovetail with what is already on the work plan for the coming 5 years?
I can attempt to take that simply to say that I don't know the answer to that right off the top of my head. We're in the process of developing the work plan, although I know that the commission will get a preview of that, I think, at the LRPC meeting at the end of this month. But that is not something that I know right off the top.
I just wondered, did not we also raise this and have a motion to ask for the county to do a study on this when we considered the Sunrise South Glebe site. I seem to recall that we had a very robust discussion about this in the and raising the same points. And I thought that we had, separate from recommending approval to it, also asking for a larger study of, let's get into this, get into the weeds and start coming up with it with a policy. Does anybody remember that? It would have been last year. We should go back and check, because I think we did, because I think I tend, for some reason, I tend to think we did do something like that, because we definitely were interested in something larger that we couldn't solve it with just the one site plan, that it really needed to be looked at more holistically. So anyway, I'm supporting, I will support this motion you're making, and it would reinforce if we did make one earlier, but I'm just trying to remind everybody that I think this came up before.
I'm at, in the abstract, I just want to note that I'm inclined to support this particular motion, but only in the context of the fact that we've heard from Mr. Pfeiffer that staff is currently working on the work plan, and I think staff would take such a motion under advisement as feedback to the work plan that's under development. As I've expressed before, I am extremely reticent to support motions that weigh in on the work plan outside of the work plan cycle, but we're in that cycle now, and so I think it's in order and would support it as such. But I just want to go on record with that hesitation. Thank you.
Appreciate it. And then I think we'll move to a vote on that motion. Start with consent. Commissioner Steiner,
Aye.
Commissioner Bagley,
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson,
Aye.
Commissioner Patel,
Aye.
Commissioner Weir,
Aye.
Commissioner Lantelmi,
Aye.
Commissioner Sarley,
Aye.
Commissioner Berkey,
Aye.
Commissioner Guevara,
Aye.
Commissioner Robertson,
Aye.
Commissioner Steinberger, aye. The motion passes. Blah, blah, blah. The motion passes unanimously, 11-0. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Now we're done with Ms. Sontag.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So our next items will be PC business and organizational matters. We'll approve the January 10 meeting minutes. If so, we have current matters from Mr. Pfeiffer, and we will adopt the 2023 annual report.
Not on my mic on, is for anyone wishing to change one of the assigned, previously identified positions to raise those items, and then we will, if there, we'll address those changes. If there are not proposed changes, those will be left, those assignments will be left alone, and we will only proceed with making assignments for the positions that need an assignment made. Also, you all received this by email, so you should have already been thinking about what positions you would like. I will take chair privilege and say that I would like to request, put myself for Historic Affairs and Landmark Review Board again. So I will take that one on page 3. And then does anyone have anything that they're currently assigned to that they would wish to not be assigned to? Commissioner Bagley?
I don't have anything not to be assigned to. I was just going to ask on forestry and natural resources.
Mhm.
I would like to be in the first position, since
Sure.
Commissioner Guerin, that was hers, and I was sort of an assistant there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Would anyone like to, since we've now brought up forestry and natural resources, would anyone like to be in the second position to Commissioner Bagley on that commission? You guys can think about it for a hot minute. Okay. All right. Any other changes that people would like to request?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I know that you've always done HALRB. Could I be in the second position there?
Love
Thank
it.
you.
Let's add. Any other requested changes? If not, then, Madam Clerk, I believe we have typically done this on a seniority type basis.
That is
But
correct.
are we required to do it on that basis?
You can do it however you please, as
All
long
right,
as we're not
then
here. till
I'm
midnight.
going to move us towards, is anyone want to pick one that they're, Commissioner Guevara, your hand is up. What would you like?
Speak into the mic, please.
Let's see, where was I? Could I do Columbia Pike or C2E2?
I believe you can have both, actually. Would you like both?
I don't know. How much work is that? Is that a lot of work?
I've never personally been the liaison for either of those. So has anyone here been the liaison for C2E2?
Has
Or-
anyone ever done both? Is that a lot? I'll try both.
Great.
Okay.
Love
But
it.
then do I still have to do the other one?
Yes,
That
you still have to
facility-
be on PFRC. Yes.
Okay. All right. All right. I'll give it a
Referencing
try.
my initial comment, which is we're not switching those, the one from the first page. So
Okay.
thank you. Commissioner Sarley. And then Commissioner Steiner.
I will take JFAC if no one's clamoring for that.
Which one did you say? AFAC? JFAC. My hearing is not good. Great. Commissioner Sarley. Okay. Commissioner Steiner, did he take yours?
No,
Okay.
no, I would have fought him for it right here in the public. No, Ballston. I'd like the Ballston.
Alton. All right. Anybody else? Still up for grabs. We have Bike Advisory Committee, Clarendon Alliance. Someone to second seat Commissioner Weir on the Form-Based Code Working Group. And Pedestrian Advisory Committee.
I should probably do the form-based code one.
All right.
Daniel, if you're okay with that.
Okay. Commissioner Peterson is taking Pedestrian Advisory Committee. Okay. Commissioner Steiner, yes.
I'll do Clarendon Alliance.
Nice. You're just soaking up that urban corridor.
It's convenient,
All right.
I don't.
Would anyone like to be friends with our bikers? Bicycle Advisory Committee. I think that's the only one we have left.
I'll take that.
Is that Commissioner Berkey?
Yes.
Nice. Okay. Commissioner Peterson already took that. Unless Commissioner Berkey, wants to make a better case to Commissioner Peterson why he should have both. I think we're spoken for.
No fight for me.
Just the bikers, got it. Okay. Thank you. That was painless, largely. And Madam Clerk, I will give you this copy where I wrote everything down.
Thank you.
Of course. Yeah, you can.
Commissioner Lantelmi is going to be the official third commissioner on LRPC.
Okay, I like it. That was Lantelmi?
Lantelmi.
Okay. Nice. Okay. So noted. Okay, so before I forget to do it, I'm going to do what I was supposed to do last month because, oops, I didn't. I had the privilege of serving as vice chair to our illustrious prior chair. Why does she look so terrified? I'm probably not going to read it, so don't worry about that. Anyway, but seriously, Commissioner Patel set such a wonderful precedent for this role. It was just a privilege to be able to watch her in action most months and really get to see. I think she made us smarter. I think she made us more compassionate, and I think she definitely expedited our meetings. So those are all things that I look to continue as I've now moved into the chair role, and for her wonderful support and leadership over this past year that we just finished. I'm pretty sure it's a gavel, but you should open the box to be sure. Of course. Yay. Round of applause for Commissioner Patel. Okay. To do approval of the minutes. Is there a motion with regards to the minutes from the January 10th, 2023 meeting?
I move for unanimous consent for approval of the January 10th, 2024 meeting.
Oh yeah, it should be 24. Yeah, minutes. Okay. Without objection, that is unanimously moved. Current Matters Planning Division. Mr. Pfeiffer, I believe you're up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually have two things to mention this month, very quickly. One, just an update. I think I slipped my mind to mention this last month, but for those of you that are old enough to remember Debbie Albert with the Planning Division, she had moved on to work on our permitting system, which is now live. She's transferred back into CPHD, and she's now working as a Deputy Zoning Administrator. So that's good news for us to get Debbie back. So the second item, and I think Commissioner Peterson and Chair Steinberger, you got the message on this last Friday, but there is now a Planning Commission calendar on our website that is solely devoted to Planning Commission only.
Mr. Pfeiffer,
yes.
don't do that. That calendar has been there for years.
Oh, you
That is not what
that calendar has been there for years. Don't let them off the hook that easily.
Threw me under the bus. Okay. Okay,
I'll take that.
Yes. That calendar exists. If I didn't know it existed, then it didn't exist. So it exists. And I believe that I shared the link with some of you, so we should circulate that widely. That is going to be populated with Planning Commission full meetings and then the 3 committee meetings. So that should be a good resource for all of you. So that is all I have to say this
morning. What about PFRC?
That's something we're talking about. Likely we would want to keep it focused only on the Planning Commission committees and meetings themselves. PFRC would be handled elsewhere. But that's we can continue to talk about that.
Okay. My initial reaction is it should be with the others, but I also don't think we have any PFRC items pending right now, so that feels like a future conversation is okay. So thank you. I believe we now have the annual adoption of the annual report. Would someone like to make a motion with regards to the 2023 annual report?
I move for unanimous consent for approval of the annual report.
Adoption.
Adoption. No, it's just approval, right? It's just approval of. Is it approval or adoption?
Or acceptance?
I think it's acceptance. Last year we went through this whole thing.
Talking to me, Mr. Pfeiffer? I'm sorry.
I am, Madam Clerk.
Oh, okay. Yes, it is adoption.
Okay.
And approval.
adoption and approval,
Yes.
please, of the 2023 report.
Correct.
I see, any objection to unanimous consent? Okay, so moved. Madam Clerk, what am I forgetting?
Meeting adjourned and we're going into recess.
We are now in recess until Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock. Commissioner Peterson will be starting us for that, and I will be joining at about 7:30.
There you go.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Do what I can.
Bring me candy.
I'm so sorry. No, my child's going through a only mommy, no one else can do anything but mommy, so I couldn't actually get anything done to like make his dinner or do anything to get out of the house because he was basically biting my leg, like holding on to me.
Okay, no.
So that was